Go ahead and open your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 12. So we've looked at over the last few weeks numerous people from the Old Testament who trusted God for specific things during their lifetime. Some were great challenges, but they had complete reliance upon God. And they had this willingness to endure faith to get them through that situation. They had this trust in our God. And so they're included here in chapter 11 to be a part of God's hall of faith. And now the writer is kind of turning the attention a little bit more upon us. That we have all these people who had such great faith in God. God delivered them through their situation. What about you? So the writer counsels us. He's telling us, let us run our race that's set before us with endurance. So we run with endurance the race that is before us. It's interesting, he's talking about, again, it's not so much a sprint, it's not a 100-yard dash, but it's that marathon, it's that long, enduring race. And so it becomes a very relevant verse for us today. And notice here, we'll go ahead and read again this first verse of Hebrews chapter 12, starting in verse 1. He talks about these witnesses to the race. He said, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin so which easily entangles us. Let us run out the race with perseverance, the race that is marked before us. So our life experiences, our circumstances pertaining to our Christian experiences are portrayed by a race to be run. That we have this faith that is going to fuel us, to help us to complete this race. Now it's interesting, and Ryan, you'll like this, that the word race in Greek is the word we get our word agony from. And we can relate to that, can't we? A lot of times that race is agony. And so describing our life here at times is filled with this agony. And so while we're running this race, while we're trying to move through this life, he says, we have this great cloud of witnesses surrounding us. And so we're filled with this crowd of people watching us. So a couple of questions kind of come to mind. Well, who are they? Well, again, the first word of the verse implies, therefore. So it's going back to chapter 11. Therefore, since we have this great cloud of witnesses, it's those who have gone on before us. Those who have completed the race, those who have finished the course, are cheering us on. And they're motivating us, they're helping us, telling us not to grow tired, not to grow weary. Keep going, keep running. You can do this. And they know kind of what we're going through. They understand because they themselves have finished the race. They themselves have endured great agony in their life. And so there they are, cheering us as we're making our way towards the finish line. Again, it's an interesting fact, again, the way we're introduced to them as such a great cloud of witnesses. Again, they've completed the race. They've competed. You ever seen, you've run a race, maybe one of the local races or marathon. Generally, at the finish line are those who have already completed the race. And there they are, encouraging you, clapping for you, yelling for you as you are approaching the finish line. You're like, I can't go on. I can't take another step. Come on. You can make it. You can make it. Only 50 more yards. And that all of a sudden, it kind of revives you. Yeah, I can do it. One of the neat things about watching the show American Ninja Warriors, as people go through these obstacle courses, all the athletes are there cheering on the other athletes. It's not so much for who gets the prize, but again, cheering on those who are competing, because they know how difficult that course is. They know how much training is involved to get ready to run that race. And so the Hebrew writer is saying that these great cloud of witnesses, these stands full of people, are those who have gone before us. They know what we're going through. They understand the heartaches, the challenges, the struggles. And so we need people like that in our life. We need to be reminded about those who've gone before us and those who are competing with us, that we keep challenging us. And so we say, man, where are they? What's going on again? And so they're there to help us. And we ask, they're surrounding us. Again, they've gone before us. They're in heaven. They're in that spiritual stadium cheering us on to help us to endure. And so they're helping us as those participants. We're on the ground floor. We're in the race. We're on the course. We're participating. And so we got this agony point of view. And so they're watching. They're looking down, and we're on the ground running, sweating. Some of us, again, we have to encourage each other. Get back out there. Get off the bench. Go, go, go. And so here he's telling us that, hey, you're off the starting blocks. You got to run that race. And so the writer goes on to tell us and try to help us, to encourage us to prepare for the race. To prepare for the race. Since faith is not a human trait, again, we're untrained in trusting God. Just like as you meet someone new, you don't give them full trust right away. You kind of watch them. You kind of learn their behaviors. You kind of learn as much as you can about them. And the more you learn about them, the more trust you have in them. And that's the way it is with God. Because sometimes in life we think, oh, I can make it on my own. I can do this. And so we have that self-reliant attitude, that self-help. But that can only get us so far. We got to learn that have that trust in God, that God is the one. And so we had this help of this great cloud of witnesses. We also got to recognize that, again, the counsel of the inspired writers that we have in reading God's word to cheer us on. And so a couple things he's trying to remind us as we're preparing us. He's telling us, think about these things. There's a few things you need to lay aside, a few things you need to get rid of. He said the first thing is, get rid of everything that hinders you, everything that is weighing you down. So that hinder is kind of means a bulk, a mass, a weight, an encumbrance, something that, again, it's excessive and it's unnecessary. You don't need those worries. You can cast those worries. You can give them to God. You don't, again, in those different doubts, again, you can have that trust. So he said, there's some things you need to cast off. You need to get rid of. You need to lay aside. Back in these days, the participants, much like our Olympic athletes today, they go through years of preparation to get ready for their one event there in the Olympics. And oftentimes, again, they go through strict diets, and some of the runners back in those days and other athletes, they'd put on ankle weights and wrist weights to help them to kind of build strength, to build endurance. And I know back when I was in school, we'd wear those ankle weights and wrist weights and stuff. And you go running with them, it's like, oh man, it's hard. But boy, all of a sudden you take off those weights and man, you can just almost like fly. You can move along because you got that freedom. That weight was holding me down, but now I've laid it aside. And so I can move a little more freely, move more swiftly, and get along. And so he's saying, there's things in your life that you need to lay aside. It's holding you back. They're deterrents. Maybe it's a lack of discipline. Maybe it's kind of a cold attitude or apathetic attitude. Maybe it's procrastination. These things, they're not really sins, but they're struggles, they're encumbrances. He said, lay those things aside. And then he says also, the second thing to lay aside is sin. These sins that keep tripping you up, keep causing you to fall, keep causing you wanting to quit the race. Again, the word sin here in this passage is missing the mark. It's wrong action. It's wandering from God. And so you become running the wrong race. You're going towards the wrong finish line. It's causing you confusion. And so in this passage here, he kind of addresses, their sin, which was sin of unbelief and doubt. They weren't trusting God. They were starting, remember, to shrink back, to give up, to quit. And so he's telling them, you got to keep going. You have to be strong. Keep trusting in God. You got to have this faith. And so the Hebrew writer is telling them, trust in Him. So again, in chapter 11, verse 6, again, talking about that doubt, again, is saying, I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that God exists and that God rewards those who seek Him. And so without this faith, it says it's impossible to please God. So he says, I know my God is alive. I know that He loves me. I know that He rewards those who seek Him. So he gives the runner some instructions here. He's telling you got to learn to run with endurance. So this idea to endure is to abide under, to wait patiently, to have this cheerful hope that knowing, man, I'm in this agony right now. It's hard, but once I get to that finish line, I'm going to have those refreshing drinks. I'm going to have everything behind me. I'm going to receive my medal. I'm going to receive my reward. So I can keep going. And so I begin thinking about these things. So it's having this patience, to get us through this process, through this race. Because we know sometimes, life is difficult. It's painful. It's challenging. And like running these marathons, you're going to get a blister somewhere. You're going to get some chafing. Your clothes are rubbing against your body constantly as it gets sore. You're going to get that stitch, that pain in your side. So he said, you got to keep going. You're going to have to endure that. Eventually, you will overcome that pain. You'll be able to get through that because, again, you're focused on the finish line. You have that cheerful hope that this isn't going to last forever. So I endure. And so he said, trust, keep going. And then he says, learn to focus on a few things while you run. And we can go back to Hebrews chapter 11 here. Let's look at verse 2. So let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, the scorning, its shame. And he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So the writer is telling us the way to make it through this race is to fix your eyes on Jesus. Fix your eyes on the finish line. Oh, I wanted to show you a clip from Forrest Gump. Remember the scene, but it was too long. Forrest all of a sudden, began running. He was thinking back about his childhood, and whenever life would get tough and these guys would start to pick on him, he would take off running. Run, Forrest, run. Well, as an adult, his life was getting hard again, going through some challenges. So he just takes off running. And so there he is going through the desert. And he's going and going. He has a long beard, and a crowd of people are following him at a distance. And finally, he just stops. And everybody else stops, and Forrest turns around and looks at him. And there's one guy hushes everybody. Quiet, quiet. He's about to say something. And all of a sudden Forrest says, I've been running for 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 6 hours. I'm pretty tired. I think I'm going to go home. And all of a sudden he just starts walking through this crowd going back to Alabama. He's just kind of running a meaningless life. He's trying to forget everything that was behind him. But for us, we're running with a purpose. We have our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author of our life, who's gone before us, who's trying to get us, again, when we look at him, we're able to get our eyes off all the troubles in our world, all the challenges and all the negativity that's portrayed in the news and stuff. And we look to Jesus. Because we know there's always been rough stuff going on, not very nice things happening. But we look at Jesus. He gives us that hope. Again, it's a cheerful hope. That waiting says, when I finish this race, it's going to be so much better. I'm going to be with Jesus. I'm going to be with my Lord. Because he is the author and perfecter of our faith. He's the one that's gone through all these things. And so he's our example. And we see the things that he's gone through. And so we run with an attitude, not of panic and despair, but we run with an attitude of hope. Because we know that, again, since our eyes are fixed on Jesus, again, he's the one that set everything before us, that we can have this right attitude. And so the writer in the Hebrews here says, consider him. Think about Jesus, Christ. He becomes our mental attitude. So in weighing our circumstances, that Isaiah wrote, you keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he's trusting you. Trust in the Lord forever. The Lord is an everlasting rock. He said, by keeping in him, you'll have that perfect peace, that steadfastness. You don't have to have all these worries. You don't have to grow weary. You don't have to give up, but you'll have an encouraged heart because he gives us that strength. And so he says, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart, that we keep our eyes on Jesus. And that's the goal. So we continue to look to him. And so the Hebrew writer, again, is giving us, again, chapter 11. Well, chapter 10, he's telling us, stay strong, stay steadfast, don't shrink back, don't give up. There's all those challenges going through, and he talks about some of the persecutions that they were facing. But we have this faith, and we see that, by faith, Abel and Abraham and Noah and all those who've gone before us, how they overcame their different situations. So he says, don't grow weary. Stay strong. Keep listening to the cheers. Keep going back and seeing what they've gone through. So he gives us people who are telling their wondrous stories about what they've gone through to encourage us, to get us going through our race, through our agony, through our challenges. So we continue to listen to the fans in the stands cheering us on because they know what we've are going through. So I just want to encourage you to keep listening to their stories. And so if you need some prayers, some encouragements to help you get through your race, again, we're here to cheer you on. And I want you to keep cheering us on as well. And so we have those yellow prayer cards. You can fill those out and pass them to the center aisle. And again, and just always be mindful of Christ. And remember the wondrous story that he lived for us and we tell for us. So let's stand and sing the wondrous story.